Hey everyone, and welcome back to English Podcast 2.0. You know how sometimes it feels like you're speaking English, but it's not quite how native speakers sound, like it's a little
Robotic.
robotic.
Yeah.
Exactly. It can be so frustrating. I mean, you're saying the words right, but it's like something's missing.
It's like the music of the language is missing,
Mhm.
right? The way native speakers group words and use pauses to create that natural flow.
Yeah, the music. It's like trying to dance without any rhythm.
Yeah.
But today, we're going to break down those musical secrets and show you exactly how to make your English sound more natural and effortless, even when you're tackling complex topics.
I think this deep dive is going to be a game changer for a lot of our listeners. It's all about mastering these things called thought groups and the art of pausing,
Hmm.
which can make all the difference in the world, not only in how you sound, but also in how well you're understood.
So tell me more about these thought groups. I mean, what are we really talking about here?
Well, think about it this way. When you're speaking, you don't just say one word after another like a robot, right? You naturally group words together into meaningful phrases. That's a thought group.
Okay, so it's like a little chunk of words that conveys a complete idea, like a mini sentence within a bigger sentence.
You've got it. And these thought groups are separated by pauses, which act like punctuation marks in spoken English.
So instead of saying, the old woman who lives next door is an actress from Italy, all in one breath, I
Exactly.
would break it down into smaller pieces.
Yeah. Like the old woman who lives next door is an actress from Italy. See? Much more natural.
Wow, that does sound so much smoother and easier to follow.
Yeah.
So are you saying that pauses are like the secret sauce to making English sound more natural?
They're a huge part of it. Pauses give your listener time to process what you're saying and anticipate what's coming next. And the interesting thing is, native speakers do this without even thinking about it.
But the good news is there are actually specific patterns they follow. And we can learn those patterns too, right?
You bet. And once you start incorporating those patterns into your speech, you'll be amazed at how much more natural and fluent you sound.
Okay, so spill the beans. What are these magical patterns that can transform my English from robotic to remarkable?
We've identified 6 key patterns that native English speakers use instinctively.
6 patterns. All right, I'm ready. Hit me with pattern number 1.
Okay, this first one might seem super simple, but it makes a huge difference. It's all about articles and possessive pronouns.
You mean those little words like a and the my, your, and so on?
Exactly. The rule is don't pause after them. They stick to the nouns they modify, forming a single unit of meaning.
So instead of saying my daughter or the book is my daughter in the book, I can see how those tiny pauses could really disrupt the flow.
It's subtle, but it makes a world of difference.
All right, what about pattern number 2? What's the next secret to sounding more natural?
This one involves infinitives. Remember, an infinitive is just a verb paired with to, like to go, to eat, to learn. And the key is to keep those infinitives together.
Got it. No splitting them up with a sneaky pause.
Right. Instead of, I want to go to the beach tomorrow, say, I want to go to the beach tomorrow.
It's like tripping over your words, even if grammatically you're technically correct.
It creates this little hiccup in the sentence that can make you sound less fluent.
I see, I see. Okay, on to pattern number 3. What else do native speakers do that we might be missing?
Think about conjunctions, those handy words like but, and, because, and although that connect parts of a sentence.
Right, they're like the glue that holds everything together.
Exactly. In spoken English, they act as bridges between ideas, and the key is to keep them connected to the thought groups they introduce.
So instead of saying, although it was raining, we went for a walk, it's,
It's although it was raining, we went for a walk.
although it was raining, we
Got
went
it.
for a walk. Okay, I see. That pause after the conjunction really throws things off.
It creates an unnatural break in the flow of the sentence.
And that brings us to clarity, right? I'm starting to realize that these patterns aren't just about sounding more native-like. They're about making sure the listener can follow what you're saying effortlessly.
Absolutely. And that leads us perfectly into pattern number 4, which focuses on clarity when talking about time and location.
Okay, tell me more about this time and location pattern. I'm intrigued.
It's all about grouping that information together and setting it apart from the rest of the sentence.
So instead of saying, yesterday morning, I went to the park, it's yesterday morning I went to the park.
You got it. It just sounds cleaner and more organized, right?
It's like you're tidying up your speech so the listener can easily grasp those key details. Awesome. Okay, what about pattern number 5?
This one's all about those words that guide your listener through your speech, like signposts on a road trip. Those are transitional
Oh,
words.
you mean words like first, then, finally, and however.
Exactly. They signal a change in direction or a new idea coming up. And just like signposts, we want to give them a little emphasis by pausing after them.
So instead of first of all, we need to gather the materials. It's first of all, we need to gather the materials. That pause really makes those words stand out.
It does, doesn't it? It's like giving them their own little moment to shine.
All right, we've arrived at the final pattern, pattern number 6. What's the last piece of the puzzle for sounding more natural?
This one focuses on those little nuggets of extra information we sprinkle into our sentences, descriptive details or clauses that add more context.
Okay, so instead of saying the man who lives next door is a doctor, it's the man who lives next door is a doctor.
Precisely. It's like adding a comma in spoken English, giving the listener a moment to process that extra detail before moving on.
Wow, these 6 patterns seem so simple, yet they make such a huge difference. It's like I've been given a secret code to unlock a whole new level of communication, but I have a feeling this is just the tip of the iceberg.
Oh, we're just getting started. There's so much more to explore when it comes to the nuances of pausing and phrasing in English.
I can't wait to dive deeper. But before we move on, I want to make sure our listeners have a chance to really absorb these 6 patterns because they are the foundation of everything we're talking about today.
Absolutely. These patterns are like the building blocks of natural sounding English.
So listeners, take a moment to revisit each pattern. Think about how you naturally speak and whether you're incorporating those pauses. Maybe even try saying a few sentences out loud, playing around with the different patterns.
And remember, it's okay if it feels a bit unnatural at first. Like any new skill, it takes practice to get comfortable with it.
But trust me, the more you practice, the more those patterns will start to feel natural and intuitive. And once you start using them in your everyday speech, you'll be amazed at how much more fluent and confident you sound.
And speaking of practice, are you ready to put these patterns to the test in some real-world scenarios?
Absolutely. I'm ready to see how these patterns work in action.
Excellent. Let's dive into some common situations where mastering those pauses and thought groups can really make you shine.
This is where it gets really exciting. Listeners, stay tuned because we're about to unveil the secrets to sounding like a native speaker in everyday conversations.
All right, welcome back to English Podcast 2.0. It's time to put those 6 magical patterns to the test and see how they work in real-life conversations.
I'm so ready for this. I feel like I've been given a secret weapon. Let's do it.
Okay, let's imagine you're in a professional meeting and your boss asks for your feedback on a new project. You might say something like, I think the project has great potential, but we need to carefully consider the budget constraints.
Okay, so let me try that with those thought groups and pauses we've been talking about. I think the project has great potential, but we need to consider the budget constraints carefully. How did I do?
That was fantastic. You naturally chunked the sentence into those distinct ideas, creating a clear and concise message.
It definitely feels a lot more professional than just rushing through the sentence without any pauses. I can see how this would make me sound more confident and in control of what I'm saying.
Exactly. And that confidence is key, especially in professional settings. Now, let's shift gears to something a bit more casual. Let's say you're catching up with a friend and they ask about your weekend plans. What would you say?
Let's see. How about this? I'm thinking of going to the beach this weekend. If the weather's nice, maybe we could go together.
Perfect. You use those pauses so effectively there, signaling those transitions between ideas and even creating that sense of invitation at the end.
It does sound more natural and inviting, doesn't it? It's like those little pauses create a space for my friend to jump in and say yes.
Now, for our last scenario, let's try a situation where you need to deliver some not so good news. Let's say you have to postpone a meeting with a colleague.
Okay, got it.
How would you approach that conversation using those pausing patterns?
Well, I would probably start by apologizing. I'm so sorry, but something urgent came up. I need to reschedule our meeting. How does next Tuesday look for you?
That was excellent. The pauses create that sense of empathy and sincerity, which is so important when you have to deliver news that might be disappointing.
I never thought about it that way, but it's true. Those pauses aren't just about sounding more native-like. They also help you convey those emotions more effectively.
That's right. And that actually brings up another crucial element of natural-sounding English: intonation, that music of your voice that adds so much color and emotion to what you're saying.
Oh yeah, intonation. I know that a rising intonation usually signals a question, And a falling intonation signals a statement, but I feel like there's got to be more to it than that.
There's a whole world of nuance there. Intonation can convey a whole range of emotions: excitement, doubt, sarcasm, you name it. It can even give you subtle hints about the relationship between the speakers.
Wow, that's amazing. It's like intonation is a secret language all on its own. So
hmm
how do we unlock the secrets of this secret language? How do we learn to use it effectively?
The best way is to immerse yourself in the language. Listen closely to how native speakers use their voices, how their voices rise and fall, how they emphasize certain words to convey different meanings.
It's like learning to sing a song, right? You listen to the melody and try to match the notes.
Exactly. And just like singing, it takes practice. But the more you practice, the more natural it becomes.
Okay, so we've got those 6 magical pausing patterns, and we've got the power of intonation. How do those two work together?
They're like the perfect partners in crime. You see, pauses often create a little space for a shift in intonation, which can emphasize a certain word or just highlight the emotion behind a phrase.
I see. It's like those pauses act as a springboard for the intonation to really take off and shine. So, for example, if I say, I went to see that new movie, it was incredible, that pause before incredible, along with that rising intonation, really drives home how much I loved the movie.
Exactly. It wouldn't have the same effect if you just said the sentence in monotone, right?
Totally. It would sound so boring, like I didn't even care about the movie.
Right, and that's the power of combining pauses with intonation. You can create a whole symphony of sound that conveys not just your words, but also your emotions and your intentions.
This is mind-blowing. It's like I'm seeing English in a whole new light. I'm not just learning to speak English, I'm learning to truly communicate.
That's the real goal, isn't it? To use language as a powerful tool to connect with others on a deeper level.
I couldn't agree more. Okay, listeners, I know this is a lot of information, but we've covered some really essential stuff today. Those 6 essential pausing patterns, the magic of intonation, and how those elements work together in real conversations.
But we're not done yet. There's still more to uncover.
Oh, I can't wait. What other secrets are you going to share?
In our next segment, we're going to delve into a very special type of pause, a pause that's so powerful it's been given its own name. We're talking about the pregnant pause.
Ooh, a pregnant pause. That sounds dramatic. I'm so intrigued.
It definitely is. Think about those moments in movies or speeches where the speaker goes silent for just a beat, and the silence hangs in the air, filled with anticipation.
Yeah, like the pause before a huge reveal or a dramatic climax.
Exactly. A pregnant pause is that deliberate silence, that's used to create suspense, to emphasize a point, or just to give your listeners a moment to really absorb what you've just said.
It's not just taking a breath. It's about using silence strategically to make our words even more powerful.
You've got it.
All right, we're back for the final part of our deep dive into the art of sounding more natural in English. You're about to tell us about this thing called a pregnant pause.
Ah, yes. Pregnant pauses, they can be so powerful when used effectively. You see, we've been talking about intonation as the music of language, right?
Right, how to make our English really sing.
Exactly. And a pregnant pause is like a rest in a piece of music. It creates a space for anticipation and allows the listener to really absorb what's been said.
So it's not just a random silence. It's a very deliberate choice that can add a whole other dimension to what we're saying.
Exactly. Think about those moments in a movie. Right before something big is about to happen, the music might stop, everyone goes silent, and you're just sitting there on the edge of your seat, waiting.
Oh, I know exactly what you mean. Like in a horror movie, right before the killer jumps out.
Yes. Or in a romantic comedy, right before the couple finally kisses. That silence creates suspense, builds anticipation, and makes the moment even more impactful.
I see. So how do we use these pregnant pauses in everyday conversations?
Well, let's say you're sharing some exciting news with a friend. You might say something like, "Guess what?" And then pause for a beat before delivering the big news. "I got the job."
Guess what? I got the job. Wow, that pause really does make a difference. It's like adding a little drum roll before the big announcement.
Right. It creates a sense of excitement and makes the listener eager to hear what's coming next. You can also use pregnant pauses to emphasize a point. Imagine you're giving a presentation and you want to drive home a key message. You might say, "The most important thing to remember is," and then pause for a moment before revealing the key takeaway.
The most important thing to remember is practice. It's like shining a spotlight on that key word, making sure everyone in the audience really hears it.
Exactly. That pregnant pause allows the listener to anticipate what's coming and gives your words more weight and impact.
This is so cool. It's like we've been given a secret weapon for making our English more engaging and persuasive.
Yeah.
But is there a danger of overusing these pregnant pauses?
That's a great question. Like any tool, pregnant pauses are most effective when used strategically. If you use them too often, they can lose their impact and even start to sound unnatural.
So it's all about finding that balance, right? Knowing when to use a pregnant pause to create the desired effect and when to just let the words flow naturally.
That's right. It's like adding spices to a dish. A little bit can enhance the flavor, but too much can overwhelm it. The key is to experiment, to play around with different types of pauses, and to see what works best for you in different situations.
This has been such an eye-opening deep dive. I feel like I've learned so much about the subtle nuances of spoken English that I never even realized before.
Me too. And remember, it's all about practice. The more you pay attention to how native speakers use pauses and intonation, and the more you experiment with these techniques yourself, the more natural and effortless your English will become.
This has been an amazing journey. We've explored the power of thought groups, unlocked the secrets of intonation, and even discovered the dramatic impact of the pregnant pause. Who knew that pauses could be so fascinating?
That's so powerful.
That's right. So listeners, keep practicing, keep experimenting, and keep listening to those beautiful melodies of spoken English. And until next time, happy speaking.
Happy speaking.